The dust cloud rising from the approaching wagon carried with it the kind of desperation that could be seen from miles away. And Quinn Yates knew trouble when he saw it rolling toward his ranch in the late September heat of 1876. He stood on the porch of his modest ranch house, watching the rickety wagon pulled by two skeletal horses make its painful progress down the dirt road toward Desdemona, Texas, a town barely worth the name scattered across the dusty landscape some 3 miles east. The wagon lurched and swayed, and Quinn could make out a woman in black holding the reins with a determination that seemed to be the only thing keeping the whole sorry outfit from collapsing into the prairie dirt. Behind her in the wagon bed, he could see the shapes of what looked like children huddled against the harsh sun. Quinn was 32 years old, a rancher who had built his spread from nothing over the past 8 years, and he had learned to mind his own business in this hard country. But something about the sight of that wagon made him set down his coffee cup and walk out into the yard, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The woman saw him and seemed to change course slightly, the wagon angling toward his property rather than continuing toward town. As she drew closer, Quinn could see the gauntness in the horses, the way their ribs showed through their hides, and he felt a familiar anger rise in his chest at the way some folks treated their animals. The wagon creaked to a stop about 20 feet from where he stood, and the woman set the brake with hands that trembled slightly, despite her obvious effort to appear steady. She was younger than he had first thought, probably not more than 25, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the color of creek water in springtime. Her black dress was faded and patched in places, the clothing of mourning worn too long out of necessity rather than custom. "Sir, I apologize for the intrusion," she said, and her voice carried the refined edges of someone who had once known better circumstances. "I was wondering if you might have some water to spare for my horses. I can pay you." She held up a coin, and Quinn could see it was barely a nickel, probably one of the last pieces of money she had in the world. "Put that away," Quinn said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I do not charge for water, not in this heat, not for animals that look like they need it." He gestured toward the water trough near the barn. "Bring them over here. Let them drink slow, though, or they will make themselves sick." The woman's jaw tightened, and she did not move to take up the reins again. "I do not accept charity, Mr. Yates." Quinn felt his eyebrows rise. "You know my name?" I asked in the last town who owned this ranch. I wanted to know if I was trespassing. She sat straighter on the wagon seat. "If you will not take payment for the water, then I will not take it. Thank you for your time." She was actually going to drive away, Quinn realized with amazement. This stubborn woman with dying horses and children in the back of her wagon was going to refuse water because he would not take her last nickel. He had seen pride before, had plenty of it himself, but this was something different. This was the kind of pride that would kill a person, and probably the ones depending on them too. "Hold on now," Quinn said, raising a hand. "I've got a proposition for you if you will hear it." The woman's green eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that involves honest work for honest pay," Quinn said. "I need help with my ranch. My cook left 2 weeks ago to get married, and I've been burning everything I try to make. I need someone who can handle a kitchen, and I need someone who can help with the bookkeeping because I am better with a rope than a ledger. If you can do either of those things, I will pay you fair wages, provide room and board for you and yours. That is not charity. That is business." The woman stared at him for a long moment, and Quinn could see her mind working, weighing his words for any hint of deceit or impropriety. In the wagon bed, 2 small faces peered over the side, a boy of maybe 8 and a girl who could not have been more than 5, both thin and sunburned and watching their mother with the kind of desperate hope that made Quinn's chest ache. "I can cook," the woman said finally, "and I can keep books. My father was a merchant before the war, and he taught me figures, but I have conditions. Let me hear them. My children and I will have separate quarters. I will not abide any assumption about the nature of my employment beyond what you have stated. And I will not be treated as a servant in front of others. I am a widow, not a hired girl." Quinn nodded slowly. "The foreman's cabin is empty. It has got 2 rooms, a stove, and it is sound. You and your children can have it. As for the rest, I am offering you a position as my housekeeper and ranch manager's assistant, which makes you part of the running of this place, not a servant. And anyone who treats you poorly will answer to me. Does that suit?" The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her spine remained straight. "May I ask why you are doing this? You do not know me. I could be a terrible cook or a thief." "Could be," Quinn agreed. "But those horses tell me you have been giving what food you had to your children and your animals, instead of selling the animals to feed yourself. That tells me something about your character. And the way you refuse to take water without payment tells me you are not looking for a handout, just a fair chance. I respect that." He paused. "And to be straight with you, I need the help. This ranch is growing faster than I can manage on my own, and I have been trying to do too much myself. So this benefits both of us, if you are willing to work hard." The woman closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears that she blinked away fiercely. "My name is Josephine Thorne. These are my children, Daniel and Margaret. My husband died 14 months ago from pneumonia, and we lost our farm in Missouri 6 months after that. We have been traveling south looking for work ever since. Quinn Yates, as you already know," he said, stepping forward to offer his hand. "Welcome to the Y Ranch, Mrs. Thorne. Now let us get those horses watered and your children out of this sun. They look about ready to roast." Josephine took his hand, and her grip was firm despite the thinness of her fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. I promise you will not regret this." Quinn helped her drive the wagon to the water trough and showed her how to let the horses drink in small amounts, waiting between each session to ensure they did not founder. Daniel, the boy, climbed down from the wagon with the careful movements of someone older than his years and immediately began helping with the horses without being asked. Margaret stayed in the wagon, watching everything with huge eyes that seemed too large for her small face. "Your boy knows his way around horses," Quinn observed. "His father taught him," Josephine said quietly. "Daniel remembers everything he was ever shown. He has been trying to be the man of the family since Thomas died. That is a heavy burden for a child." "Yes," Josephine agreed, her voice tight. "It is, but we do what we must." Quinn showed them to the foreman's cabin, a sturdy structure built from good lumber and stone about 100 yards from the main house. It had indeed been meant for a foreman, but Quinn had never gotten around to hiring one, preferring to manage the ranch hands himself. The cabin had a main room with a fireplace and cookstove, a separate bedroom, and a loft space that would be perfect for the children. "It needs cleaning," Quinn said apologetically, looking at the dust that had accumulated. "But it is sound and weather-tight." "It is wonderful," Josephine said, and there was no mistaking the genuine relief in her voice. "We have been sleeping in the wagon for 2 months. This is like a palace. There are linens in the trunk there, and I will have some firewood brought over. Take today and tomorrow to settle in and rest. You can start your duties the day after, if that suits you." Josephine shook her head. "I will start preparing supper this evening if you will show me your kitchen." "I am not here to rest, Mr. Yates. I am here to work. You have been on the road for months by the look of it. Surely one day will not make a difference. It will make a difference to how I see myself, Josephine said firmly. I am not a woman who accepts handouts, even kindly meant ones. If I am your employee as of now, then I begin earning my wages now. Quinn recognized the steel in her voice and knew better than to argue. All right then. Let me show you the main house kitchen and you can tell me what you need. The main house was a sprawling single-story structure that Quinn had built in sections as he could afford it. The kitchen was large and reasonably well equipped, though Quinn admitted freely that he had no idea how to use half the equipment properly. Josephine moved through the space with the confidence of someone in her element, checking the larder, examining the state of the stores, and mentally cataloging what needed to be done. You have good supplies, she said, but your organization is chaos. How do you find anything? With difficulty, Quinn admitted, and a lot of swearing. A ghost of a smile crossed Josephine's face, the first he had seen from her. I will have this sorted properly within a week. As for tonight, I can make a decent stew with what you have here, and there is flour enough for bread if your starter is still good. I have no idea if it is still good. I have not made bread in longer than I care to admit. Then I will start a new batch. Fresh bread takes time, but I can have it ready by tomorrow. She paused. Mr. Yates, I want to be clear about something. I appreciate this opportunity more than I can say, but I will not be beholden to anyone. I will work hard and I will earn every penny you pay me. If at any point you feel I am not meeting expectations, you must tell me immediately. I will, Quinn promised. And the same goes for you. If something is not working, if you need something, you speak up. I may be the owner of this ranch, but a partnership only works if both sides communicate honestly. Josephine looked at him directly for the first time since their meeting, really looked at him, and Quinn found himself noticing things he had not before. The proud line of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she held herself with dignity despite her circumstances. She was a beautiful woman, he realized, though the hardship she had endured had temporarily dimmed that beauty. With rest and proper food, she would be striking. Partnership, Josephine repeated softly. I like that word better than employment. Then partners it is, Quinn said. In running this ranch, at least. Over the next several days, Quinn watched with amazement as Josephine transformed not just the kitchen but the entire operation of the ranch house. She woke before dawn and worked until after dark, preparing meals that were the best Quinn had tasted in years, organizing the household accounts with meticulous care, and somehow managing to clean and order every space she touched. Daniel and Margaret helped where they could, the children slowly losing the haunted wariness that had marked them when they arrived. Quinn made sure to pay her at the end of the first week, counting out the coins carefully and adding a little extra for the supplies she had requested for the household. This is more than we agreed upon, Josephine said, looking at the money. The extra is for household expenses. You need to order supplies, and I trust you to know what is needed better than I do. Keep an account of what you spend, and we will square up at the end of each month. Josephine nodded, accepting his explanation, though Quinn could see she was still uncomfortable with what she perceived as charity. He would need to find ways to make her understand that she was genuinely earning every penny and more. The ranch was running more smoothly than it ever had, and Quinn found he actually had time to focus on the business of raising and selling cattle rather than constantly putting out domestic fires. It was during the second week that things began to shift between them in ways that Quinn had not anticipated. He came in from working with the horses one afternoon to find Josephine in his office, sitting at his desk with the account books spread before her. She looked up as he entered, and there was concern in her eyes. Mr. Yates, may I speak plainly with you, always? Your accounts are in worse shape than I realized. You have been underselling your cattle at market, Quinn frowned. How do you figure? I went into town yesterday for supplies, and I spoke with some of the other ranchers' wives. The prices you have been accepting for your stock are significantly lower than what others are getting for comparable animals. I think your buyer has been taking advantage of you. Quinn felt his jaw tighten. He had suspected something similar, but had not had the time or knowledge to confirm it. Can you prove it? Josephine turned the ledger toward him, and he saw that she had created a detailed comparison chart showing his prices versus market rates over the past year. The discrepancy was significant, amounting to hundreds of dollars in lost revenue. This is good work, Quinn said quietly. Damn good work. I knew something felt wrong, but I could never pin it down. I took the liberty of writing to several stockyards in Fort Worth and Dallas, requesting their current prices and terms for sellers. We should have responses within a few weeks, and then you can make a more informed decision about where to sell your next herd. Quinn said, looking at her with new appreciation. You are really taking this partnership seriously. Josephine colored slightly. You trusted me with your accounts. That means you trusted me with the financial health of this ranch. I do not take that trust lightly. Quinn sat on the edge of the desk, studying her. You know, when I made that offer on the road, I really did need a cook and someone to help with the books. But I did not expect someone with your level of skill and intelligence. You could be running your own business with knowledge like this. I had hoped to once, Josephine said quietly. Thomas and I planned to open a general store once we had saved enough money, but then he got sick, and the medical bills took everything. And then he died, and the bank foreclosed on the farm because I could not make the payments alone. Everything we had built just disappeared. I am sorry, that must have been terrible. It was. But feeling sorry for myself does not help my children. Working hard and building something new does. She looked at him directly. That is why I am grateful for this opportunity, Mr. Yates. Not because you gave me charity, but because you gave me a chance to prove what I can do. You have already proven it, Quinn said, and I think we can dispense with the formalities, at least when we are working together like this. You can call me Quinn. Josephine hesitated. That might not be appropriate. We are partners, remember, partners use given names. A small smile crossed her face. Very well, Quinn, and you may call me Josephine, though most people call me Josie. Josie, Quinn said, trying it out, I like that, it suits you. The moment stretched between them, something unspoken but palpable hanging in the air. Then Daniel burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. Mama, Mr. Quinn. There is a horse having a baby in the barn. The spell broke, and they both hurried after the boy toward the barn. One of Quinn's mares was indeed in labor, and Quinn quickly assessed the situation. It was not the mare's first foal, and the birth appeared to be progressing normally, but it was always good to monitor such things. Can we stay and watch? Daniel asked eagerly. Quinn looked at Josie, who nodded. If Mr. Yates does not mind, I think it would be educational for them. I do not mind at all, but it might take a while, and it is not always pretty. We do not mind, Margaret said, speaking up for the first time in Quinn's hearing. We saw lots of animals born on the farm before Papa died. They settled in to wait, Quinn explaining the process to the children in simple terms while keeping a close eye on the mare. Josie sat on a hay bale with Margaret leaning against her, and Quinn found himself acutely aware of her presence. She asked intelligent questions about the horses, about the ranch, about his plans for the future, and Quinn found himself answering more fully and honestly than he had with anyone in a long time. I want to build this into one of the best ranches in North Texas, he said. Not the biggest necessarily, but the best, known for quality stock and fair dealing. A place where a man's word means something and where the people who work here are treated with respect. "That is a good goal," Josie said. "And from what I have seen, you are well on your way to achieving it." "With help," Quinn said, looking at her meaningfully. "I could not do it alone, despite thinking I could for a long time." The foal arrived just after sunset, a gangly colt with a white blaze on its face. The children watched with awe as the newborn struggled to its feet and began nursing, and Quinn felt a surge of satisfaction at the successful birth. As they walked back to the house in the gathering darkness, Margaret slipped her small hand into Quinn's, a gesture of trust that made his throat tight. "Thank you for letting us watch, Mr. Quinn," she said softly. "You are welcome, little one. Anytime you want to see the horses, you just ask." That night, after the children were in bed and Josie had returned to their cabin, Quinn sat on his porch and thought about how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks. The ranch was running better than ever, his home was clean and comfortable, and he was eating like a king. But more than that, he found himself looking forward to his conversations with Josie, to the way her mind worked, to the quiet competence with which she handled everything. He was not fool enough to mistake gratitude for something else, Quinn told himself sternly. Josie was a widow still grieving her husband, a woman trying to build a stable life for her children. The last thing she needed was her employer developing feelings that would complicate their working relationship. He would keep things professional and friendly, treat her with respect, and ignore the way his pulse quickened when she smiled. But as the days turned into weeks and summer gave way to fall, Quinn found his resolution increasingly difficult to maintain. Josie was simply unlike any woman he had known before. She was intelligent and capable, yes, but she was also fiercely independent, surprisingly funny once she relaxed, and deeply compassionate. He saw the way she treated the ranch hands with respect regardless of their station, the way she saved scraps for the barn cats, the way she sang softly while she worked in the kitchen. It was a Saturday afternoon in early October when things shifted again. Quinn had taken Daniel out to teach him to rope, something the boy had been begging to learn. Josie had protested initially, worried about the danger, but Quinn had assured her he would be careful, and Daniel's pleading had eventually won out. The boy was a natural, picking up the basic throws with surprising ease. Quinn found himself enjoying the teaching, remembering his own father showing him these same skills years ago. They worked for a couple of hours until Daniel's arm grew tired, and then walked back toward the house together. "Mr. Quinn," Daniel said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you going to marry my mother?" Quinn stopped walking, startled. "What makes you ask that?" Daniel shrugged, kicking at a rock. "Some of the men in town have been talking. They say you must be courting her because why else would you have a woman living on your ranch? And I heard Mrs. Henderson at the general store saying it was scandalous." Quinn felt anger kindle in his chest at the gossip, but kept his voice calm. "Your mother is my business partner and employee. She lives on this ranch because she works here, just like the ranch hands live in the bunkhouse because they work here. There is nothing scandalous about it." "But would you want to?" Daniel pressed. "Marry her, I mean, because it would be okay with me if you did. You are nice, and you make her smile, and she does not smile much anymore." Quinn knelt down to the boy's level. "Daniel, your mother is a wonderful woman. Any man would be lucky to have her regard. But right now, she is focused on taking care of you and your sister and building a secure life for your family. Marriage is not something she is thinking about, and it would not be right for me to press her about it when she works for me. Do you understand?" "I guess," Daniel said. "But I think she likes you. She watches you sometimes when she thinks nobody is looking." Quinn felt his heart skip, but forced himself to stay rational. "Your mother is a good woman who has been through a lot. The last thing she needs is more complications in her life." So we are going to keep being her friend and employer, and we are not going to make things difficult for her by pushing for something she might not want. Can you agree to that? Daniel nodded slowly. You really do care about her, do not you? I care about your whole family, Quinn said carefully. You have all become important to me. That seemed to satisfy the boy, and they continued back to the house. But the conversation stuck with Quinn, gnawing at him. He had been telling himself he could keep his feelings in check, but Daniel's innocent question had forced him to examine those feelings more honestly. He did care for Josie, more than was probably wise, more than he had cared for anyone in a very long time. The question was what, if anything, to do about it. The answer came unexpectedly a week later, when trouble arrived at the ranch in the form of a well-dressed man driving an expensive buggy. Quinn was working with the horses when he saw the buggy approaching, and something about it set his instincts on edge. He walked out to meet it, and the man who climbed down was perhaps 50, with graying hair and the soft hands of someone who did not do physical labor. "Can I help you?" Quinn asked. "I am looking for Mrs. Josephine Thorne. I was told in town she might be found here. May I ask your business with her?" The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I am Edward Dalton. Mrs. Thorne's late husband owed me a considerable sum of money, and I have come to collect it." Quinn felt his jaw tighten. If her husband is dead, then the debt died with him unless it was secured against property. "Oh, it was secured," Dalton said smoothly. "Against their farm, which I foreclosed on and sold, but there was still a balance owed, and I have been tracking Mrs. Thorne for some months now to collect it. That does not sound legal." "I assure you, it is entirely legal. I have the promissory note right here, signed by both Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. In Missouri law, a wife is liable for her husband's debts if she co-signed the note." Quinn's mind raced. "How much?" $230 plus interest and collection costs. Call it $300 even. It was a substantial sum, probably more than Josie had seen in cash in years. Quinn thought quickly. "And if she cannot pay, then I will be forced to pursue legal remedies. Garnishment of wages, seizure of assets, possibly even jail time for debt fraud if she has been avoiding payment." Dalton's smile widened. "Of course, there might be other arrangements that could be made. Mrs. Thorne is a handsome woman, and I am a widower myself." Quinn's hands clenched into fists, and it took every ounce of self-control not to plant one in Dalton's face. "Get off my property," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I beg your pardon. I said get off my property before I throw you off, and you stay away from Mrs. Thorne. I have a legal right to collect my debt. Then you can go through a lawyer like a civilized human being instead of showing up here making vile insinuations. Now leave." Dalton's face darkened. "You are making a mistake, Mr. Yates. This does not concern you. Everything that happens on my ranch concerns me. Leave. Now." The man climbed back into his buggy with poor grace, but before he drove away, he called back, "She will have to deal with me eventually. Better it be on friendly terms than through the courts." Quinn watched him go, fury and concern warring in his chest. He needed to talk to Josie, needed to know if what Dalton said was true. He found her in the kitchen preparing supper, and the moment she saw his face, her hands stilled on the bread dough she was kneading. "What happened?" "A man named Edward Dalton was just here. He claims your late husband owed him money and that you co-signed the note." All the color drained from Josie's face. "He found me," she whispered. "I had hoped after all this time that he had given up. Then it is true." "Yes," Josie said, her voice breaking. "Thomas borrowed money from Mr. Dalton to buy equipment for the farm. I signed the note too because that was the only way he would loan us the money. But Thomas swore we would be able to pay it back within 2 years. Then he got sick and everything fell apart. How much do you owe him? The original loan was $150, but with the interest and what he claims are legal fees, he said it is over $300 now. I do not have that kind of money, Quinn. I barely had enough to feed my children before you hired me. Quinn moved closer to her. What exactly did Dalton say to you when he found you before? Josie would not meet his eyes. He said I could work off the debt, that if I became his mistress, he would consider the account settled. That son of a... Quinn bit off the curse. What did you tell him? I told him I would rather die. That is why I ran. I took the children and what little we could carry in the wagon, and I just started driving south. I thought if I could get to Texas, find work, maybe save enough to pay him back properly and get him off our trail. She looked up at Quinn, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry. I should have told you about this before. If I have brought trouble to your door, stop, Quinn said firmly. He took her by the shoulders, making her look at him. You have brought nothing but good to this place, and you are not alone anymore, do you understand? We will figure this out together. Quinn, it is $300. That is more than I will make in a year working here. I know. But I have the money. Josie's eyes went wide. No, absolutely not. I will not take that kind of money from you. It would not be a gift, it would be a loan. You pay me back when you can, at reasonable terms and no interest. We draw up a proper contract, everything legal and above board. That could take me years to repay. Then it takes years. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you if you do not want to be. Josie was shaking her head. I cannot accept that. You have already done so much for us. Josie, listen to me. That man will not give up. He will take you to court, and even if the law is on your side, the legal fees alone could destroy you. And if he wins, he could have you arrested or worse. I will not stand by and let that happen when I have the means to prevent it. But $300, Quinn, that is a fortune. It is a lot of money, Quinn agreed. But this ranch is doing well, and thanks to your work, it is going to do even better. I can afford this, and I want to do it. Please let me help you. Josie closed her eyes, tears still sliding down her cheeks. Why would you do this for me? Quinn knew he was standing at a crossroads. He could give her a practical answer, talk about the ranch and their partnership and how he needed her skills. Or he could tell her the truth and risk everything they had built together. He chose the truth. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my employee or my partner. You became someone I care about, someone I admire and respect, and maybe something more than that. And I cannot stand the thought of that bastard Dalton or anyone else hurting you or taking you away from here when I have the power to stop it. Josie's eyes opened, and she stared at him. Quinn, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. You do not have to feel the same way I do. We can forget I said it and just go back to how things were. But please let me help you with this debt. Let me do this one thing. For a long moment, Josie just looked at him, and Quinn could see 100 different emotions crossing her face. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, but on one condition. You draw up a proper contract with repayment terms and everything legal. I will not have anyone saying you bought me or that I am beholden to you beyond a business agreement. Done. I will have the lawyer in town draw up the papers tomorrow, and I will go with you to pay Dalton. I want to make sure everything is properly discharged and that he knows you are under my protection now. Under your protection, Josie repeated softly. Thomas used to say that. That I was under his protection and nothing bad could happen to me. But something bad did happen. Yes, he died and left us alone. Josie wiped her eyes. I am terrified of depending on anyone again, Quinn, of trusting someone to take care of us and then having them disappear. I understand that, but I am not going anywhere, Josie. And this is not me taking care of you. This is us taking care of each other. You have been protecting my interests since you got here, making sure I do not get cheated and running this place better than I ever could alone. Let me protect your interests now. Josie took a shaky breath. You said you care about me. As what? An employee, a friend. Quinn knew this was the moment where he could retreat, play it safe, keep things comfortable. But he was tired of safe, and he had never been one to lie. As a woman, I am falling in love with, if I am being completely honest. But I know the timing is terrible, and you have every reason not to trust that, so I am not asking for anything from you. I am just being straight about where I stand. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Then Josie did something that shocked him. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. Quinn stood frozen for a second before his arms came up to hold her, and she was shaking, either from tears or relief, or something else entirely. I do not know if I can love anyone again, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. I do not know if I have it in me after everything, but I do care about you, Quinn, more than is probably wise. You have been kinder to me and my children than anyone has been in a very long time, and not because you wanted something from me, but just because you are a good man. So yes, pay off my debt, and I will sign your contract, and we will figure out the rest as we go. Is that acceptable? Quinn tightened his arms around her. That is more than acceptable. That is perfect. They stood like that for a long moment before the sound of Margaret calling for her mother pulled them apart. Josie wiped her eyes quickly and straightened her dress, trying to compose herself. Quinn caught her hand before she could turn away. Whatever happens with the rest of it, we are in this together now. Partners, remember? Josie squeezed his hand. Partners, she agreed, in all things. The next day, Quinn rode into Desdemona with Josie beside him in the wagon and the children in the back. They went first to the lawyer's office, where Quinn explained the situation. The lawyer, a shrewd older man named Potter, listened carefully and then nodded. I can have the contract drawn up by this afternoon. As for Dalton, I know the man by reputation. He is a vulture who makes his money lending to desperate people and then crushing them when they cannot pay. If he has been pursuing Mrs. Thorne across state lines, there might be questions about whether his claim is even enforceable in Texas. Let me look into the legal precedents. How long will that take? Quinn asked. A few days, maybe a week. In the meantime, do not pay him anything. If his claim is not legally sound, you will just be throwing money away. They left the lawyer's office with instructions to wait and stay away from Dalton. But as they were loading supplies into the wagon at the general store, Edward Dalton himself appeared, his face red with anger. I heard you were in town, Mrs. Thorne. Have you reconsidered my generous offer? Mrs. Thorne has nothing to say to you, Quinn said, stepping between them. Any business you have with her goes through her lawyer now. Her lawyer? Dalton laughed harshly. She cannot afford a lawyer. This is absurd. I have a legal debt to collect. Then collect it through legal channels, Quinn said. But you stay away from her or you will have bigger problems than an unpaid debt. Are you threatening me? I am promising you. This is Texas, Dalton. We take care of our own here, and Mrs. Thorne is under my protection. If you harass her again, you will not like what happens next. Several of the local ranchers and townsmen had gathered, drawn by the commotion, and Quinn could see them nodding in agreement. Dalton looked around and seemed to realize he was outnumbered. This is not over, he hissed. I will have my money one way or another. Then file your papers with the court like a civilized man, Quinn said, but leave her alone. Dalton stalked away and the tension eased. One of the ranchers, an older man named Clem who owned the spread adjoining Quinn's, clapped him on the shoulder. Good for you, standing up for the lady. Dalton is a snake. He tried to ruin my cousin back in Missouri with the same kind of predatory lending. Did he succeed? Nope. My cousin found a smart lawyer who proved Dalton was charging usurious interest rates. Case got thrown out, and Dalton ended up having to pay court costs. You make sure Mrs. Thorne gets a good lawyer, and she will probably come out ahead. Quinn thanked him for the information and relayed it to Potter later that day. The lawyer's eyes lit up with interest. If I can prove usury, this whole debt could be invalidated. Let me send some inquiries to Missouri and see what I can dig up on Dalton's business practices. Over the next week, while they waited for Potter to complete his investigation, life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Quinn and Josie were more open with each other now, talking late into the evening about their hopes and fears and plans for the future. Quinn told her about his childhood on a small ranch in South Texas, how he had saved every penny working as a cowhand until he could afford to buy this land and start his own operation. Josie told him about her life before Thomas, growing up as the daughter of a merchant, learning the business from her father who had believed girls should be educated just as well as boys. He was unusual that way, Josie said one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set. Most men would not have taught their daughter to read ledgers and calculate profit margins. But Papa said the world was changing and women needed to be able to take care of themselves. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. He died when I was 19 and Mama followed him 6 months later. I think her heart just broke. They loved each other so much. Josie was quiet for a moment. I thought Thomas and I would have that. We were fond of each other and we had a good partnership, but I do not think it was the kind of love my parents had. Quinn looked at her. Do you regret marrying him? No. He was a good man and he gave me my children. But I think we both knew we were settling, making a practical choice rather than a passionate one. And when he died, I grieved him, but I also felt guilty because I was not as devastated as I thought I should be. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you honest and human. Sometimes I wonder if I am even capable of the kind of love my parents had. Maybe I am just too practical, too focused on survival to feel those kinds of deep emotions. Quinn reached over and took her hand. I do not believe that. I have seen how you love your children, how fiercely you protect them and work for them. That is the deepest kind of love there is. That is different. They are my children. Love is love, Josie. It just comes in different forms. And I think you are more than capable of any kind of love you choose to give. She looked at their joined hands. Are you always this patient and understanding? Because it is rather intimidating. Quinn laughed. I am not always patient. Ask the ranch hands about the time I threw a branding iron across the corral because I was so frustrated with a stubborn cow. But with you, it is easy to be patient. You are worth waiting for. Josie turned to face him fully. What if I am not? What if you wait, and I never become what you hope I will be? Then I will still consider myself lucky to have known you and to have you as my partner and friend. Anything more than that is a gift I will not take for granted. You make it very hard not to care about you, Quinn Yates. Good, Quinn said with a grin. That is exactly my plan. 2 weeks after their confrontation with Dalton, Potter sent word that they should come to his office immediately. They made the trip to town, leaving the children with one of the ranch hands' wives, and found the lawyer practically bouncing with excitement. I have got him, Potter said, spreading papers across his desk. Edward Dalton has been running the same scheme across 3 states. He lends money to desperate farmers at interest rates that are technically legal in Missouri, but only barely. Then he adds all kinds of hidden fees and costs, compounds the interest in ways that are definitely not legal, and pursues people across state lines for debts that have already been satisfied. I have got affidavits from 6 different people he has defrauded. including the cousin of Clem Masters. And I have got copies of the promissory notes showing the illegal interest compounding. What does this mean? Josie asked, her voice trembling with hope. It means your debt is invalid, not just the interest and fees, but the entire debt. In fact, based on what you paid him before you left Missouri, he technically owes you money. Josie sank into a chair, her hand over her mouth. Are you certain? Absolutely certain. I am going to file a complaint with the Texas court and also send all this information to the Missouri authorities. Dalton is going to be lucky if he does not end up in jail himself. As for you, Mrs. Thorne, you are free and clear. Quinn felt a weight he had not even fully acknowledged lift from his shoulders. What about Dalton? Will he cause more trouble? I will handle Dalton. Once he sees what evidence I have, he will leave town faster than a scalded dog. Men like him are cowards at heart. They only pick on people who cannot fight back. They left the lawyer's office in a daze, and once they were back in the wagon and out of sight of town, Josie began to cry. Not delicate tears, but great sobbing gasps of relief and release. Quinn pulled the wagon over and gathered her into his arms, letting her cry herself out while he held her and murmured reassurances. It is over, she kept saying. It is really over. He cannot hurt us anymore. No, he cannot. You are safe now. You and the children are safe. When she finally calmed down, Josie pulled back and looked at Quinn with reddened eyes. I do not know how to thank you. If you had not stood up to him, if you had not hired a lawyer, I would probably be running for the rest of my life. You do not need to thank me, but there is something I want to ask you now that this is settled. What is it? Quinn took a deep breath. I want to court you properly, Josie, not as your employer or your partner in business, but as a man who is serious about his intentions toward you. I know it has not been that long since Thomas died, and I know you might not be ready, but I want you to know where I stand. I want a future with you and with Daniel and Margaret. I want us to be a family. And I am willing to wait however long it takes for you to be ready for that too, if you are willing to consider it at all. Josie was quiet for a long moment, and Quinn felt his heart hammering in his chest. Then she reached up and cupped his face in her hands. I think I have been falling in love with you for weeks now and trying to pretend I was not, she said softly. Because I was afraid. Afraid of depending on someone again, afraid of losing someone again, afraid of not being enough. But you have shown me in 100 different ways that you are not Thomas, and you are not going to disappear or leave me to handle everything alone. So yes, Quinn Yates, court me properly. Take your time and do it right. And when we are both ready, maybe we can talk about that future you mentioned. Quinn kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise rather than passion. Josie kissed him back, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. So what does proper courting look like in your mind? Josie asked. Well, I have only done it once before, and that did not work out, so I am a bit rusty. But I think it involves spending time together, taking you to town for socials, maybe going on picnics with the children, bringing you flowers, that sort of thing. That sounds lovely. Though I have to say, the flowers on this ranch are mostly weeds. Then I will bring you the prettiest weeds you have ever seen. They drove back to the ranch hand in hand, and when they told the children that the debt was cleared and that Quinn was going to be courting their mother, Daniel's whoop of joy could probably be heard all the way to town. Margaret threw her arms around both of them, and suddenly they were all hugging and laughing, and Quinn felt something tight and painful in his chest finally release. This was what he had been missing all these years. Not just a woman to share his life with, but a family. People to care for and to care about him in return. A reason to build something that would last beyond his own lifetime. The courting that followed was everything Quinn had promised, and more. He took Josie into town for the harvest dance, where they scandalized some of the more conservative citizens by dancing together 3 times in one evening. He brought her flowers, even if they were just wildflowers from the prairie, and she always put them in a jar on the kitchen table. They went on picnics with the children, exploring the creek that ran through Quinn's property and teaching Daniel and Margaret to fish. But more than the grand gestures, it was the small daily intimacies that built their relationship. The way Quinn would find excuses to touch Josie's hand when they were going over the account books together. The way Josie would save him the best pieces of roast at dinner. The way they would sit on the porch in the evening and talk about everything and nothing while the children played nearby. Quinn also made a point of spending time with Daniel and Margaret, getting to know them as individuals rather than just Josie's children. He taught Daniel more about horses and ranching, impressed by the boy's quick mind and natural skill with animals. He learned that Margaret loved stories and started reading to her in the evenings from his small collection of books. The children began calling him Quinn instead of Mr. Quinn, and then one day, Margaret slipped and called him Papa. She had looked horrified and started to apologize, but Quinn had just smiled and said he would be honored to be her papa if that was what she wanted. Josie had cried at that, and later that night, she told Quinn it was the moment she knew for certain that she loved him. Because you did not just accept my children as part of the package of being with me. You genuinely love them for who they are, and they love you back. That is more precious to me than anything else you could give me. By the time winter arrived, it felt natural for Josie and the children to spend most of their time in the main house, rather than the foreman's cabin. They would all eat dinner together, and then the children would do their lessons at the kitchen table, while Quinn and Josie worked on ranch business in his office. More than once, Quinn would look up from his paperwork to find Josie watching him with a soft expression on her face, and he knew his own face probably looked the same way when he looked at her. It was a cold December evening when Quinn decided he could not wait any longer. They were sitting by the fire in the main house, the children already asleep in their rooms, and Josie was mending one of Daniel's shirts while Quinn pretended to read a cattle journal. He kept looking at her over the top of the pages, watching the firelight play across her face, and finally he set the journal aside. "Josie, can I talk to you about something?" She looked up from her mending. "Of course. You sound serious. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, everything is pretty much perfect, and that is what I want to talk to you about." Quinn got up and knelt down beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "We have been courting for almost 3 months now, and before that, you lived and worked here for another 3 months. I know it has not been a year yet since Thomas died, and maybe some people will think we are rushing things. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am about this. I love you, Josie. I love your children. I want us to be a real family, not just people living on the same ranch. Will you marry me?" Josie's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Quinn, so much it sometimes scares me. And you are right. Some people will probably talk about the timing, but I do not care. I'm not going to put off being happy just because other people think I should wait longer. Life is too short and too uncertain for that." Quinn pulled a small box from his pocket. "I went into Fort Worth last week and bought you a ring. It is not fancy, but I wanted you to have something." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire. Josie gasped. "Quinn, it is beautiful, but you should not have spent so much. You are worth it. And the sapphire is the color of your eyes in certain light." The jeweler pointed it out, and I could not resist. Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and this time the kiss was deeper, full of promise and passion and the certainty of a future together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josie laughed shakily. "We should probably wait until we are married before we take this much further." "Agreed," Quinn said, "though I plan to marry you as soon as possible so that wait will not be too long." "How soon is as soon as possible?" "Would right after Christmas be too soon? Give us time to plan a little bit. Invite whoever you want, make it proper." "That sounds perfect. Let us do it on December 28th. That gives us almost 3 weeks to prepare." They spent the next days in a whirlwind of activity. Quinn sent word to his scattered relatives, though he did not expect many to make the journey in winter. Josie wrote to a few friends from Missouri, though she was not sure any of them would receive the letters in time. They went into town to arrange for the church ceremony and to order supplies for a celebration afterward. The townspeople of Desdemona were divided in their reactions. Most were genuinely happy for them, having seen the way Quinn and Josie looked at each other and approving of a hard-working widow finding love again. But there were a few, led by a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson, who clucked their tongues and whispered about impropriety and unseemly haste. Quinn heard about the gossip from Clem Masters, who found it hilarious. "Henderson is just jealous because you did not ask to court her daughter. Never mind that the girl is 20 years younger than you and has the personality of a fence post. Some people just cannot stand to see other folks happy." On Christmas Eve, Quinn gave Josie his mother's Bible, which had been the most precious thing his mother owned. "I want you to have this. My mother would have loved you, and she would have been proud to welcome you into our family." Josie cried and gave him a pocket watch that had belonged to Thomas. "I want you to have this, not because I am replacing him, but because you have been more of a father to his children than most men would have been. He would have appreciated that, and I think he would have approved of us." They told Daniel and Margaret on Christmas morning that the wedding would be in just 3 days, and the children were ecstatic. Margaret immediately began planning what she would wear and talking about flowers. Daniel, trying to be more grown-up about it, just shook Quinn's hand solemnly and said, "Welcome to the family, sir." The wedding itself was simple but perfect. Josie wore a dress she had made herself from dark blue fabric, the color appropriate for a widow remarrying but beautiful nonetheless. She carried a small bouquet of hothouse flowers that the general store owner had ordered special from Fort Worth as a wedding gift. Daniel stood up as Quinn's best man, trying hard not to fidget in his new suit. Margaret was Josie's only attendant, looking adorable in a new dress and clutching a matching bouquet. The church was full despite the cold weather, with ranchers and townspeople and ranch hands all crammed into the pews. Even a few people who had been critical of the quick wedding showed up, unable to resist a good celebration. Clem Masters gave Josie away in the absence of her own father, and the old rancher had tears in his eyes as he placed her hand in Quinn's. The ceremony was traditional and short, but when Quinn and Josie exchanged their vows, there was not a dry eye in the church. Quinn's voice was steady and strong as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life. Josie's voice trembled with emotion, but never wavered as she made the same promises to him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and told Quinn he could kiss his bride, Quinn did so with all the love and joy he felt in his heart. The congregation burst into applause, and Margaret and Daniel rushed forward to hug them both. They walked back down the aisle as a family, and Quinn felt like his heart might burst from happiness. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn decorated with pine boughs and candles. Josie had spent days preparing food with help from some of the neighboring ranch wives who had overcome their initial disapproval and decided to support the young widow instead. There was roast beef and ham, potatoes and vegetables, fresh bread and pies, and even a wedding cake that was more frosting than cake but tasted delicious. Quinn danced with his new wife under the strings of lanterns they had hung from the barn rafters, and he danced with Margaret too, making her giggle as he spun her around. Josie danced with Daniel, who was just tall enough now to partner her properly. And then they all danced together, the four of them in a circle, laughing and happy. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Quinn and Josie stood together watching the last wagons pull away into the winter night. The children had already gone to bed, exhausted from the excitement, and the ranch was quiet except for the sounds of the horses in the barn and the wind in the grass. "Are you happy?" Quinn asked softly, pulling Josie close. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," she said. "Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate widow on the road. Thank you for seeing something in me worth partnering with. Thank you for loving my children and giving us all a home. Thank you for accepting my offer that day instead of being too proud to stop. Thank you for working so hard and making this ranch better than I ever could have alone. Thank you for taking a chance on a rough cowboy and agreeing to spend your life with him." They kissed again, husband and wife now in truth, and then Quinn swept her up in his arms and carried her across the threshold of the main house, which was truly her home now. They spent their wedding night learning each other, discovering the passion that had been building between them for months, and when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, it was with the deep contentment of two people who had found exactly what they needed in each other. The months that followed were some of the best of Quinn's life. Winter gave way to spring, and the ranch flourished under their joint management. Josie proved to have an even better head for business than Quinn had suspected, negotiating deals with buyers that brought in significantly more money than he had been making on his own. With the extra income, they were able to hire more help and expand the herd. Daniel took to ranching like he was born to it, working alongside Quinn and the ranch hands whenever he was not doing his schoolwork. Quinn taught him everything he knew about horses and cattle, and the boy soaked it up like a sponge. They officially adopted both children in March, changing their last names to Yates, and the pride on both children's faces when they signed the papers made Quinn's eyes sting with tears. Margaret thrived too, blossoming from a quiet, wary little girl into a chatterbox who followed Josie around asking 1,000 questions a day. She started attending the school in town, and her teacher reported that she was one of the brightest students she had ever taught. In June, Josie told Quinn she was pregnant. He had never seen her look so nervous as she did when she broke the news, as if she was worried about his reaction. Quinn had just picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, until she was laughing and begging him to put her down before she got dizzy. The pregnancy was easier than her previous ones, perhaps because she was not working herself to exhaustion while pregnant this time. Quinn made sure she rested when she needed to and did not lift anything heavy. Daniel and Margaret were excited about having a sibling, though Margaret hoped for a sister, and Daniel insisted it would be a brother. In February of 1878, Josie gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Thomas Quinn Yates, honoring both of the men who had loved Josie. Thomas was a loud, vigorous baby who kept them all up at night, but who also brought immense joy to the family. Quinn found himself completely besotted with his son, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, spending hours just watching the baby sleep. Daniel and Margaret adored their baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help take care of him. Watching them together, Quinn felt a deep satisfaction. This was what he had wanted, what he had been building toward without even fully realizing it. A family, a legacy, people to share his life with and to pass the ranch on to someday. 2 years later, Josie had another baby, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth. Rose was quieter than Thomas had been, a contemplative baby who studied everything with serious eyes. Margaret was in heaven having a little sister to dress up and play with, though she remained protective and loving toward her brothers too. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1880, the Y Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region, known for quality stock and fair dealing just as Quinn had dreamed. They had built a new house, bigger and more comfortable than the original, with enough room for their growing family, and for the stream of visitors who came to do business or just to visit. Josie managed the business side of the ranch with skill and efficiency, while Quinn handled the day-to-day operations and the cattle. But they made all major decisions together, true partners in every sense of the word. The respect and affection between them was obvious to everyone who saw them together, and their happiness seemed to radiate outward, making the ranch a pleasant place to work and visit. Daniel grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like Quinn, but with his mother's head for business. He attended the new agricultural college in Bryan for 2 years, learning modern ranching techniques, and then came home to help run the ranch. He married a local girl named Sarah when he was 23, and they built a house on the northern section of the property. Margaret proved to be brilliant with numbers and organization. She helped her mother manage the books and correspondence for the ranch, and she also started a small business raising and selling chickens and eggs. She was courted by several young men but was in no hurry to marry, declaring that she wanted to see more of the world first. When she was 21, she traveled to Dallas with her father's blessing and took a position as a clerk in a bank, one of the first women in the city to hold such a position. Thomas grew up strong and stubborn, with his father's determination and his mother's intelligence. He loved the ranch and declared from an early age that he would never leave it. He became an expert horseman and inherited Quinn's patience for working with difficult animals. Rose was the gentle soul of the family, always ready with a kind word or a helping hand. She loved growing things and planted extensive gardens around the house, providing fresh vegetables and beautiful flowers. She was particularly close to her mother, and the two of them could often be found working together in the kitchen or the garden, talking and laughing. As the years passed, Quinn and Josie's love only deepened. They had their arguments, as any couple did, usually about money or how to handle various situations with the children. But they had learned to talk through their disagreements and to respect each other's opinions even when they did not agree. Their physical passion remained strong too, and more than once their older children had to pretend not to notice when their parents disappeared into their bedroom in the middle of the day. One evening in the fall of 1890, Quinn and Josie sat on the porch of their home watching the sun set over their land. They were both in their mid-40s now, showing touches of gray in their hair but still healthy and strong. Daniel and Sarah's children, 3 rambunctious grandchildren, were playing in the yard under Thomas's watchful eye. Rose was in the garden picking the last of the autumn vegetables. Margaret was expected home from Dallas for a visit the next day. Did you ever imagine it would be like this? Josie asked, leaning against Quinn's shoulder. What, the ranch? I hoped it would be successful, but I never imagined it would grow this much. No, not the ranch, this, us, the family, all of it. Quinn wrapped his arm around her. Honestly, no. I thought I would probably live my whole life alone, focused on building the ranch and not much else. And then this stubborn woman refused my charity and demanded a partnership instead, and everything changed. Josie laughed. I was so terrified that day. We were down to our last few dollars. The children were hungry, and I had no idea how I was going to keep going. But I was too proud to just take water without paying for it. Thank God for that pride. If you had just taken the water and left, I never would have had the excuse to offer you a job. Do you think we would have found each other anyway if I had not stopped here that day? Quinn considered the question. I would like to think so. But I am glad we do not have to find out. I am glad you stopped, glad you accepted my offer, glad you took a chance on me. Best decision I ever made, Josie said softly. Well, second best. The best decision was falling in love with you. I thought you said I made it impossible not to fall in love with me, what with my patience and my way with your children and my rugged cowboy charm. Josie elbowed him lightly. I never said anything about rugged cowboy charm. You made that part up. But you were thinking it. Maybe I was, Josie admitted with a smile. You did look rather dashing when you stood up to Dalton that day in town. Whatever happened to him anyway, I never heard. Potter told me years ago that Dalton ended up in prison in Missouri for fraud. He cheated the wrong person, someone with money and connections, and they made sure he paid for it. He died in prison about 5 years ago. Good riddance, Quinn said without sympathy. The world is better off without men like him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their family and their land in the fading light. Then Quinn turned to Josie and kissed her softly. What was that for? She asked. Do I need a reason to kiss my wife? No, I suppose not. But you had a particular look on your face. Quinn smiled. I was just thinking about how lucky I am. How I started out thinking I needed to build this ranch on my own, be completely self-sufficient and independent. And then you taught me that partnership is stronger than independence, that letting people in does not make you weak, it makes you stronger. You gave me a family and a home, not just a house and a business. You made my life worth living, Josie, and I am grateful for that every single day. Josie's eyes filled with tears. You gave me just as much, you know. You gave me safety and security when I thought I would never have either again. You loved my children as your own and gave them a father they could rely on. You saw me as a partner and an equal, not just a woman who needed taking care of. You gave me a reason to hope again, to dream again, to love again. I would not trade this life for anything. They kissed again, deeper this time, and Daniel called from the yard, Get a room, you two. There are children present. Quinn and Josie broke apart laughing, and Josie called back. You are just jealous because Sarah is not here to kiss you. Daniel made a rude gesture, but he was grinning, and the grandchildren were giggling at their silly grandparents. Thomas shook his head in mock disapproval, but was smiling too. Rose came up from the garden with a basket of vegetables and paused to look at her parents still sitting together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. You two are disgustingly sweet, you know that. She said, but her voice was full of affection. We know, Quinn said cheerfully, and we do not care. As night fell over the Y Ranch, the family gathered inside for dinner, talking and laughing and arguing good-naturedly about everything and nothing. The table was full of food that Josie and Rose had prepared. The children were healthy and happy. The ranch was prosperous, and Quinn looked around at everything he had built and felt a deep sense of peace. This was what mattered. Not just the land or the cattle or the money, though those things were good and necessary, but the people, the family, the love that filled this house and made it a home. And it had all started with a widow who refused charity and a cowboy who offered partnership instead. Quinn caught Josie's eye across the table, and she smiled at him, that special smile that was just for him. And Quinn smiled back, knowing that no matter what else happened in their lives, no matter what challenges or joys lay ahead, they would face it all together. Partners in all things, just as they had promised each other that first day. And that, Quinn thought, was the best partnership of all. As the years continued to pass, the Y Ranch remained a thriving hub of activity and family life. Margaret eventually returned from Dallas with a husband in tow. a banker named Robert, who had fallen head over heels for the rancher's brilliant daughter. They built a house in town but spent every weekend at the ranch, and their children grew up running wild across the property just as their mother had. Thomas married at 25 to a girl from a neighboring ranch, a practical, hard-working woman named Anna who fit perfectly into the family. They took over the day-to-day running of the ranch as Quinn and Josie gradually stepped back, though neither of them could fully retire from the work they loved. Rose surprised everyone by falling in love with a traveling photographer who passed through Desdemona, and after a courtship conducted largely through letters, she married him and moved to Austin. But she returned regularly with her artist husband and their creative, free-spirited children, bringing life and laughter to every visit. Quinn and Josie's relationship remained the foundation of the family, the example all their children looked to for what a marriage should be. They still worked together daily, still sat together on the porch every evening, still held hands when they thought no one was looking. They weathered difficult times together, losing ranch hands to accidents, surviving droughts and harsh winters, dealing with the inevitable conflicts that arose in any large family. But they weathered them together, never losing sight of the partnership that had started it all. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn threw a huge celebration at the ranch, inviting everyone they knew from miles around. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Daniel gave a speech about what his mother and stepfather meant to him, how Quinn had stepped into a father's role and never once made him feel like anything less than a true son. Margaret talked about her mother's strength and Quinn's kindness. Even Thomas, not usually one for public speaking, stood up and said simply that he could not imagine better parents. Josie cried through all of it, and Quinn kept his arm around her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. When it was finally their turn to speak, they stood together in front of their family and friends, and Josie spoke first. 20 years ago, I was alone and afraid, running from a man who wanted to control me, trying desperately to keep my children fed and safe. I did not think I would ever feel secure or happy again. And then this stubborn cowboy insisted on giving me water for my horses, and then insisted on giving me a job instead of charity. He saw me as a partner when I had nothing to offer but pride and determination, and he gave me back my life. She turned to Quinn. Thank you for every day of these 20 years. Thank you for every challenge we faced together and every joy we shared. Thank you for being the best husband and father I could have asked for. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Quinn had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. I am not good with fancy words like my wife is, but I will say this. The day Josie stopped at my ranch was the day my real life started. Everything before that was just me going through the motions, building something without really knowing why. She taught me what I was building for. She gave me purpose and family and love. And she did it all while being the smartest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. I am the luckiest man in Texas, and I thank God every day that she was too proud to accept charity and that I was smart enough to offer partnership instead. The crowd erupted in applause, and their children rushed forward to hug them, and the party continued late into the night. Quinn danced with Josie under the stars, and they were both transported back to their wedding night, to all the nights since, to all the moments big and small that had built their life together. 20 more years, Quinn asked as they swayed together. At least, Josie promised. At least. And they got their 20 years and more. They grew old together gracefully, watching their grandchildren grow up and have children of their own. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by 3 generations of family, still holding hands, still partners in everything. Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74, with Josie beside him holding his hand. She followed him just 18 months later. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed as she smiled and said, "He is waiting for me. I can feel it. Your father is waiting." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under an oak tree that Quinn had planted the year they married. The headstone was simple but perfect, reading Quinn and Josephine Yates, partners in life and love. The Y Ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, always thriving, always known as a place where hard work and fair dealing mattered, where family came first, and where the story of its founders was told and retold as an example of what love and partnership could build. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, ranch hands swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old house, sitting close together and watching the sunset, well, nobody was surprised. Some partnerships were too strong to be broken even by death. Some love stories did not end. They just transformed, becoming part of the land itself, part of the legacy left behind. The story of the widow who refused charity and the cowboy who offered partnership became part of Texas folklore, told in different versions across the state. But the truth was simpler and more beautiful than any embellishment could make it. Two people had found each other at exactly the right moment, had recognized in each other what they needed most, and had built a life together based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and true partnership. They had created a family, a home, and a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lives, and in the end, that was the greatest success of all. Not the land or the money or the cattle, though those were good, but the love they shared, the children they raised, the example they set for generations to come. That was the true measure of their partnership, and it was beyond price. In the small cemetery on the hill, where Quinn and Josie rested side by side, wildflowers grew every spring without fail. The same wildflowers Quinn had picked for Josie during their courtship, blooming in profusion around their final resting place. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would visit the graves and tell their own children the story of how it all began. With a desperate widow on a dusty road, her pride intact despite her circumstances. With a lonely cowboy who had everything except what mattered most. With an offer of water that became an offer of partnership that became an offer of the heart. And with two people brave enough to accept what was being offered and wise enough to build something lasting from it. The story of Quinn and Josephine Yates was a love story, yes. But more than that, it was a story about dignity and respect, about the strength found in partnership, about the courage to start over and the wisdom to recognize help when it came in unexpected forms. It was a story about family, both the one you are born into and the one you create. And it was a story about the American West, about the people who built lives in a hard land through determination, hard work, and the support of those they loved. Their legacy lived on not just in the ranch that bore their name, but in the values they had instilled in their descendants. Hard work, fair dealing, respect for all people regardless of their station, the importance of partnership and mutual support, the understanding that accepting help was not weakness and offering help was not charity if it was done right. And perhaps most importantly, the knowledge that love could be found in the most unexpected places and at the most unlikely times, and that when you found it, you should have the courage to embrace it fully, to build on it, to let it transform your life into something better than you could have created alone. That was the true story of Quinn and Josie Yates. That was their gift to the generations that followed. And that was why their story was still being told 100 years later, when the original ranch house had become a museum, and the Y Ranch had grown into an empire spanning thousands of acres. Because some stories are too good, too true, too important to be forgotten. Some love stories transcend their time and place to become universal, speaking to fundamental human needs and desires. The need for partnership, the desire for respect, the hope for second chances. The belief that love can heal old wounds and create new possibilities. Quinn and Josie had found all of that and more in each other. And in doing so, they had created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. A family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. And it all started with a widow who refused charity, a cowboy who offered partnership, and two hearts brave enough to recognize what they had found in each other, and wise enough to cherish it for the rest of their lives.